Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Now this shows extreme depth of field, achieved without any image stacking. Instead I used a tilt-shift lens. And combined with good lighting technique, the end result is really in check. And in this video I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so this is my subject. Fairly standard chessboard, which I've just set up on this table here. And then I have my tripod. Now I'm using a tripod with a geared head on it on purpose today, so that I have fine control over the angle that the camera is pointing at the subject. On the camera I have this full frame digital SLR, and on the front of that I have a 24mm tilt-shift lens. Now I'm using a tilt-shift lens so I can manipulate the plane of focus. So with this lens it's possible to tilt the lens elements relative to the camera body. And by doing that you can actually change the plane of focus. Normally it would be parallel to the sensor in the camera. But by tilting the lens, it's possible to make that plane of focus change to an angle. And that can be very useful for a number of different subjects. Okay, and the camera itself is tethered into Capture One software, so it's easy to see the results. Okay, so I'm just going to pop this on this tripod, like so. Now on the top of the camera here, I have this flash sync trigger. So that will allow me to synchronize the flash that I'm going to use, the studio head, and also control it from the top of the camera. So with all that done, next thing to do would be just to line up the shot. So what I'm going to do is just look through the viewfinder and compose the image. So the first thing I'm going to do, wind up the center column on this tripod just to elevate the camera. So I want an elevated point of view, probably something like that. And then I'm just going to tilt the camera down using the geared control on the top of the tripod. So this gives quite a lot of control. There, something like that. And you can see that as we are at the moment, the depth of field is somewhat limited. Okay, so with that now done, the next thing to do would be just to turn the camera on. And I'm just going to do a test exposure with the software just to see what results I get with the settings on the camera as they are at the moment. So I have a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second, which is the flash sync speed for that camera, ISO 100, and an aperture of f8. So at these settings, I'll just grab an image. There we go, and to all intents and purposes, there's very little of an image there. Okay, so with that experiment out of the way, the next thing to do is to set a light. So what I'm going to do is use this very small, really, studio head. This is a Profoto B2. The new equivalent of that would be a B10, something like that. That's the same sort of energy level. There we go, and I'm just going to place this just over this corner like that. The idea is that I want to illuminate just this bit and let the rest fall off in a graduated manner. Okay, so with that in position, I'll just turn the pack on here, like so. And with an arbitrary energy level, I'll just grab an image and see what we get. Well, straight away you can see from that the exposure isn't that bad, but the shadows are a little harsh. So to combat that, what I'm going to do is add this reflector, and on the front of this reflector I've just clipped a piece of 216 diffusion material, and this in effect will give me a very small softbox. But there again, this is all very close to the subject, and therefore from the subject's point of view this will be actually quite large. So it should give a very soft result. Let's just pop this on and see how it goes. Yeah. There we go. So with that now on the head, I'll grab another exposure and we'll see what we get. Yes, that looks a bit better. You can see that the shadows are much softer than what we had before, and the graduation is a bit nicer too, but it's still not quite in the right place, I don't think. So what I'm going to do is just move this ever so slightly further away from the camera, and we'll just grab another image just to see what that looks like. Yes, well, I think that has actually degraded the image instead of improving it. I think I need to move the head just a little bit further towards the camera instead of away from it. And the movements that I'm putting on here are very small. Okay, so with that set, we'll just grab another image. Yes, I think that's got it. That's looking a little bit better. I think overall the exposure's possibly a little down, so I might add half a stop to the energy level on that head, and I'll grab that again. Yes, and I think as far as the lighting is concerned, that's not too bad. The focus does leave a lot to be desired at the moment. This rook, for instance, is out of focus, whereas the bishop is in focus. So we do need to adjust that. And achieving the maximum depth of field is really what this image is all about. So what I'm going to do is look through the viewfinder and at the same time adjust the lens. So this is the view that you get with the plane of focus in the normal position. So now if I tilt the lens down, you should be able to see that the plane of focus shifts. And if I now tilt that through the normal position and now tilt it upwards, you can see that it shifts in the opposite direction. So if I just bring that back to normal, and with that in the normal position, what I'll do now is just focus the lens on the nearest object, like that. And now I'll focus it on the object which is furthest away, like so. And I've actually got to change the focus quite considerably in order to do that. However, if I now tilt the lens all the way down, like we did before, and now alter the focus, I find that going from the nearest object to the furthest object is a tiny change in focus on the lens, which can probably be taken up with the depth of field that you can achieve by increasing the aperture. So that small change in focus can probably be accommodated by changing the aperture from f8 to something a little smaller to give us a bigger depth of field. So what I could do is change from f8 to f16. Now of course that is a two-stop change in exposure, so I'll just add 2 stops to the energy in the light, like so. And we'll grab that again. There we are, that seems to have worked quite well. So now we have a plane of focus which is tilted across the image. Therefore, the focus at the back here is more or less the same as it is at the front here. And you can see that by just comparing the original picture. So this is what we had before, and this is what we've got now. So we've been able to achieve that extreme depth of focus without doing any image stacking or any post-processing. So talking of post-processing, with that image now captured, all it remains is to go into Photoshop and do the bare minimum of post-processing to finish it off. So here we are in Photoshop, and there really is very little that needs doing to this image. But there's a few things that I'm going to address, such as these catches and this area down here and so on. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make a duplicate of the file. So just right-clicking on the layer here, go to Duplicate Layer and ask for a new document, and we'll just call this Chess. There we go. So that makes a new file, so I can dispense with the camera original. We don't need that one anymore. Right, so the next thing to do would be just to address these areas down the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is add a new layer, like so. And with this layer selected, I'm just going to make a selection which just runs along the edge of the chessboard. So just using the polygon lasso tool, I'll just pick a point, just click the mouse, and now pick another point, and click the mouse again, and now click another point, and just finish that off like so. There. And finally, just click the two together. So that has selected this area. So what I'm going to do now is making sure that black is the foreground color. I'll just find a paintbrush, and I'm literally just going to paint that in. And it doesn't matter if I go over the lines, because I'm actually only painting the selection, like so. There we are. Good. Now with that done, I can just deselect that. There, that's made that quite a lot blacker. And because it's on a separate layer, I can turn that layer on and off. And if I've made any errors, then I can go back and change it without having to reload the whole image. Okay, now the only other thing that I'd like to address is this area here, which I find a little distracting, where the two sides of the chessboard haven't lined up properly. Okay, so in order to address that, what I'm going to do is just make a copy of the background layer, just like that. Then I'm going to manipulate this copy, which again gives me redundancy. So if I make an error on this, I can always go back to the original. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in to this area, like so. And again, I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool, and I'm just going to select this area of the chessboard. So somewhere around there, let's click the mouse, somewhere around there, click it again, come down here and just join the two together. Now the reason I'm doing that is so that anything that I do now will only affect this area and it won't affect the rest of the picture at all. So what I'm going to do is go up to Filter and come down to Liquify. There we are. Now what I want to do is just move this part of the image. So just with the Liquify brush here, what I'm going to do is just grab that, just move it up a little, just like that. Just move that bit very gently. And again, just at the other end, just move that the very slightest bit, like so. There we are. It doesn't matter if you make an error with this, because you can always go backwards. So if I just cancel out of that, for instance, and now reselect the filter, it will start from where I left off. So I can just pick that part up and just realign it like so. Maybe just pick that edge up and just very carefully realign that. And that bit too. With those bits done, I'll just click on OK. And now that's added those things to this selection. So I'll just deselect that. There, that's a bit more in line than it was before. So it just remains to actually just get rid of this line. And to do that, I'm just going to use the healing brush tool. So just using the Alt key on the keyboard, I'll just select where I want it to sample from. So I'll just paste that in like that. And most of the time it's made a good job. This bit down the side here isn't quite so good, and the bit just on the very edge there isn't quite so good either. But everywhere else it seems okay. So I'll just tidy those little bits up just with a conventional clone tool. So again, just using the clone tool and using the Alt key on the keyboard, I'll just grab part of that image like that and just pop that back as it was. And the same down this edge. Grab that part. There. Okay, so with that now complete, we'll just zoom back out again. And finally, I'll just pick a crop. Now, obviously, I'm using this for video, so I'm just using a standard 16:9. But you can just pick a crop which suits your subject. I'm just going to bring the edges in ever so slightly, just to concentrate the image. Just move that up to there. When I'm happy with that, I'll just click on the tick icon at the top just to commit that. There we go. And there we have it. This image just illustrates that it's possible to achieve an extreme depth of field without image stacking, just using the tilt function of a tilt shift lens. And I think I've ended up with a very pleasant result there. Okay. Well, I hope you liked watching how I'd made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and click on the like button. Thank you very much for watching.